The winds howled across the desolate landscape, sending whirlpools of dust spiraling into the air. Ethan Gray adjusted the strap of his weathered backpack and squinted at the horizon. Behind him, the others followed. Carter Hill, the team's technician, Owen Price, the sharpshooter, and the youngest member, Nate Foster, a strategist in the making. They were a mismatched team of explorers with one common goal: to locate the forgotten fortress. According to the map, it should be just beyond that ridge, Carter said, holding a tablet that displayed a mix of satellite images and ancient cartography. If this map is accurate, Owen said skeptically, and we're not chasing another myth. It's real, Nate said confidently. The fortress was used as a sanctuary centuries ago, and it's said to contain artifacts unlike anything we've seen before. Historical records don't lie. We'll see, Owen muttered. Ethan didn't contribute to the banter. His focus remained on the ridge ahead. He wasn't here for treasure or glory. His motivations were personal. The fortress was tied to his family's past, and he needed answers. The first sign. As they crested the ridge, the fortress came into view. Its silhouette was haunting, with crumbling towers and walls partially swallowed by the desert sands. There it is, Carter whispered. Looks like it's seen better days, Owen said, raising his binoculars to scan the area. Doesn't mean it's empty, though. Stay sharp. The team descended toward the fortress, each man on high alert. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the crunch of their boots on the sand. The entrance was a gaping archway, its carvings worn but still intricate. Ethan ran his fingers over the symbols, recognizing some of the patterns from the journals his grandfather had left behind. This place isn't just a fortress, he said. It's a vault. A vault for what? Nate asked. Secrets, Ethan replied. Inside the fortress. The air inside was cool and stale. Sunlight filtered through cracks in the ceiling, casting eerie patterns on the stone floor. The team's flashlights illuminated the walls, which were covered in more carvings and faded murals. This architecture doesn't match anything from the region, Carter noted. It's like it doesn't belong here. Maybe it doesn't, Nate suggested. The group moved deeper into the fortress, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous halls. Ethan felt a growing unease. The place felt alive, as if it were watching them. Anyone else feel like we're being followed? Owen asked, gripping his rifle tightly. It's just your imagination, Nate said, though his voice wavered. Ethan wasn't so sure. The first discovery. In one chamber, they found rows of pedestals, each holding a strange object. Some were metallic, others stone, and a few seemed to pulse faintly with an inner light. What is this stuff? Carter asked, carefully examining a metallic cube. Artifacts, Ethan said. But not just any artifacts. These are tools, maybe even weapons. From who? Nate asked. Not who, Ethan corrected. What? Before anyone could respond, the floor beneath them trembled. A deep rumble echoed through the fortress, followed by a series of clicking noises. What was that? Owen demanded, aiming his rifle toward the doorway. Something we probably woke up, Carter said grimly. The Guardians. The clicking grew louder, and moments later, shadowy figures emerged from the darkness. They were humanoid, but unmistakably mechanical, with glowing eyes and limbs that moved with unnatural precision. Robots? Nate asked, disbelief in his voice. Guardians, Ethan said. They were built to protect the fortress. And now they think we're intruders, Owen said, opening fire. The bullets ricocheted off the Guardians' metal bodies, barely slowing them down. Carter scrambled to find a way to disable them, while Ethan and Nate worked together to create a diversion. Over here, Ethan shouted, throwing a flare into an adjacent hall. The bright light drew the Guardians' attention, giving the team a chance to retreat. This way, Carter called, leading them through a maze of corridors. The heart of the fortress. They finally reached a massive chamber at the center of the fortress. In its center stood a towering obelisk covered in glowing runes. "This is it," Ethan said, his voice filled with awe. "The heart of the fortress." "What does it do?" Nate asked. "I'm not sure," Ethan admitted, "but it's powerful. Maybe too powerful." "Can we shut it down?" Owen asked, still watching the doorway for signs of the Guardians. "Maybe," Carter said, examining the obelisk's base. "But it's not going to be easy." As Carter worked, Ethan noticed something strange. The runes on the obelisk seemed to react to his presence, glowing brighter as he approached. "Ethan," Nate said cautiously, "I think it's responding to you." The revelation. Ethan touched the obelisk, and a surge of energy coursed through him. Images flashed in his mind, scenes of ancient civilizations, wars fought with unimaginable weapons, and the construction of the fortress itself. He stumbled back, overwhelmed. "What happened?" Carter asked. "It's not just a vault," Ethan said, his voice shaking. "It's a weapon, one capable of wiping out entire civilizations. That's why it was hidden here." "Then we can't let anyone find it," Nate said. "Agreed," Owen said. "But how do we destroy it?" Before anyone could answer, the Guardians reappeared, their glowing eyes fixed on the group. The final stand. The team fought desperately, using everything at their disposal to hold off the relentless Guardians. Carter managed to rig an explosive device, setting it at the base of the obelisk. "We've got 2 minutes before this place goes up," Carter warned. "Then let's move," Owen shouted. As they fled, Ethan hesitated. He turned back to the obelisk, feeling a strange pull. "Ethan," Nate called, "what are you doing?" Ethan shook his head, breaking free of the trance. "I'm coming." The team raced through the fortress, the Guardians close behind. They reached the exit just as the explosive detonated, sending a massive shockwave through the structure. The aftermath. The fortress collapsed in on itself, burying the obelisk and the Guardians beneath tons of rubble. The team stood at a safe distance, watching the dust settle. "It's over," Owen said, lowering his rifle. "For now," Ethan said, "but something tells me this isn't the last we'll see of this technology." "What do you mean?" Nate asked. "If this fortress existed, there could be others," Ethan said. The team exchanged uneasy glances, realizing their journey might only be beginning. The small town of Ashford was a quiet, unassuming place, nestled between rolling hills and dense forests. Its cobblestone streets wound through rows of brick homes and small shops. Among these was Wolf's Timepieces, a modest clock repair shop that had been in business for over 3 decades. The shop's owner, Arthur Wolf, was a reclusive man in his late 50s. Known for his meticulous work and quiet demeanor, Arthur rarely spoke of his past. What little the townsfolk knew of him was pieced together from fleeting conversations and vague rumors. Most chalked up his solitary nature to the untimely loss of his family years ago. But Arthur carried a secret, one so profound that even he wasn't sure if it was a gift or a curse. The apprentice one drizzly autumn morning, the shop bell jingled, signaling a customer. Arthur glanced up from his workbench, where a disassembled pocket watch lay in pieces. The visitor was a young man, perhaps in his early 20s, with dark hair and an eager expression. "Mr. Wolf?" the man asked, stepping inside and shaking off the rain from his coat. "That's me," Arthur replied without looking up. "I'm Thomas Reed," the young man said. "I'm here to apply for the apprentice position." Arthur raised an eyebrow. The position had been advertised months ago, and no one had expressed interest until now. "You're late," Arthur said dryly. "I'm persistent," Thomas replied with a small grin. Arthur studied him for a moment before nodding. "Fine. Let's see if you can handle this." He gestured toward the pocket watch on the bench. "Reassemble it. You have an hour. Thomas rolled up his sleeves and got to work. A curious talent. To Arthur's surprise, Thomas completed the task in 45 minutes. Not bad, Arthur admitted, examining the reassembled watch. You've done this before. My father was a clockmaker, Thomas said. I've been around gears and springs my whole life. Arthur nodded. You start tomorrow. Over the next few weeks, Thomas proved himself to be a quick learner and a diligent worker. He was curious, often asking Arthur about the history of the clocks they repaired and the stories behind the unusual ones. One day, Thomas pointed to an ornate clock on a high shelf. It was unlike any other in the shop, with intricate carvings and a faint blue glow emanating from its center. What's that one? He asked. Arthur's expression darkened. It's not for sale. Why not? Because it's dangerous, Arthur said curtly, ending the conversation. The clock's mystery. Thomas couldn't stop thinking about the strange clock. One evening, after Arthur had left for the day, Thomas decided to take a closer look. He climbed onto a stool and carefully brought the clock down. It was heavier than it looked, and the glow seemed to pulse faintly, as if it were alive. Turning it over, he found an inscription on the back. Time bends to those who dare. Curiosity got the better of him. Thomas wound the clock and set the hands to midnight. The glow intensified, and the room seemed to shift around him. A leap in time. When the glow subsided, Thomas found himself standing in the middle of a bustling market. The cobblestone streets and brick buildings were still there, but the people looked different. Their clothing was old-fashioned, and horse-drawn carriages clattered down the streets. Where am I? Thomas muttered. A newspaper vendor caught his eye. Thomas grabbed a paper and stared at the date. October 12th, 1894. Somehow, the clock had transported him over 100 years into the past. Meeting the inventor. As Thomas wandered the town, trying to make sense of what had happened, he noticed a familiar name on a shop sign: Wolf's Timepieces. He entered the shop to find a younger version of Arthur Wolf tinkering with a clock. You're not supposed to be here, Arthur said without looking up. Thomas froze. You know who I am? Arthur sighed and set down his tools. Not exactly, but if you're holding that clock, it means you've figured out its secret. You built it? Thomas asked. Arthur nodded. Years ago. I was a fool, thinking I could control time. All I did was create a mess. What kind of mess? Arthur gestured toward the glowing clock. That device doesn't just move through time, it creates ripples. Every trip changes something, no matter how small. I stopped using it when I realized the damage it could cause. A warning. Ignored. Arthur warned Thomas to return to his own time immediately and to never use the clock again. But there's so much we could do with it, Thomas argued. We could fix mistakes, prevent disasters. Arthur cut him off. Time doesn't work that way. Every action has consequences. Trust me, you don't want to carry that burden. Reluctantly, Thomas agreed. He wound the clock and returned to the present. The ripple effect. When Thomas returned, he noticed subtle differences. The shop's layout had changed slightly, and Arthur seemed more irritable than usual. You used it again, didn't you? Arthur accused. No, Thomas lied. Arthur's gaze bore into him. Don't lie to me. The clock leaves a mark on those who use it. Thomas avoided his eyes and went back to work. But the temptation was too great. A dangerous experiment. Over the next few weeks, Thomas began using the clock in secret, experimenting with small trips into the past. He avoided major events, focusing instead on observing and learning. But the more he used the clock, the more he noticed things changing. People he knew acted differently, and events didn't unfold as he remembered. One evening, Arthur confronted him. "You've gone too far," Arthur said. "The clock is unstable. If you keep using it, you'll tear everything apart." "I just wanted to understand it," Thomas said defensively. Arthur shook his head. "It's not meant to be understood. It's meant to be destroyed." The final trip. Arthur decided the clock had to be dismantled, but before he could do so, Thomas stole it and activated it one last time. This trip took him further back than ever before, to a time when Ashford was nothing more than a cluster of wooden shacks. As he explored, he realized the truth. The clock's power came from an ancient artifact buried beneath the town. He found the artifact, a glowing crystal, and tried to remove it. But as he touched it, a blinding light engulfed him. The collapse. When Thomas awoke, he was back in the present, but something was wrong. The town of Ashford was gone, replaced by a barren wasteland. Arthur appeared beside him, older and wearier than before. "You broke the timeline," Arthur said. "The artifact wasn't just powering the clock, it was holding everything together." "What do we do now?" Thomas asked, panic in his voice. Arthur held up the damaged clock. "We fix it. Together." Restoring time. Arthur and Thomas worked tirelessly to repair the clock. It was their only hope of undoing the damage. Finally, after weeks of effort, the clock was ready. "This will take us back to the moment you first used it," Arthur explained. "We'll stop this before it starts." Thomas nodded, guilt heavy in his heart. "I'm sorry," he said. Arthur placed a hand on his shoulder. "We all make mistakes. Let's make this right." A new beginning. The clock's glow enveloped them, and they found themselves back in the shop on that drizzly autumn morning. This time, when Thomas asked about the apprenticeship, Arthur hesitated. "I'm sorry," Arthur said. "The position's been filled." Thomas left, disappointed but unaware of the disaster he had narrowly avoided. Arthur locked the clock away, vowing to keep its secret forever. And so, time continued, unbroken.